Citizens of football land, welcome back to the Badlands feed. It's Buck the Trend. I'm your host, Dan Essian, coming to you live from the West Coast this week, switching it up a little bit, giving you a little review, a little reaction to the Jets' day one of the draft from a little Buck the Trends type of lens. We're going to go through a little bit on Fashanu, what the Jets are getting, why they did it, a little bit of some of the reactions I think we've been seeing, and then we're going to get into some of the day two strategy and options. And let's get right into that. So, first day, Olu Fashanu. I think a lot of folks were, I would say surprised. Yeah, I think the general consensus was that offensive tackle was an option. It was pretty interesting, though, that really since the very beginning of the process, they weren't really connected with Fashanu too often. I think, early in the process, it was a lot of like, he's going to go too early. And then as things started to move along, it's like, oh, he may get to 10, but it just seemed like it wasn't really an option, especially before free agency. A lot of talk about Fuaga, a lot of talk about how they liked him at the Senior Bowl. And that seemed to be pretty consistent throughout the process, more than, even the possibility of Fashanu falling. And then if he does fall, if that is an option for them. So pretty interesting to see that they were able to keep those cards so close to the vest. This process, definitely a good sign of maybe some changes that have happened in the front office impacting how widely known their strategy is. But yeah, it works to their benefit to move a little bit more quietly. But yeah, they get Fashanu in, obviously big for my personal brand as a, always calling for the Jets to draft more Nigerian players. But yeah, I mean, really cool to see him get brought into the fold. Obviously, going offensive tackle, I think it was a responsible reaction to the results of last season. I think for as long as we complained about the lack of insurance along the offensive line, this Olufashanu pick is clear evidence that they learned from those mistakes, and they're like directly reacting to and resolving for a lot of the things that popped up last season. I think they're basically kind of, saying that they think there's a good chance that they'll need to have him on the roster in terms, like, I don't think this is a situation where they're like, oh, there's like no chance he's going to be on the field. It's not they have like, 27-year-old offensive tackles, already in the fold that, have typically played full seasons. They have, two guys over 30 who have missed a lot of games recent years. So I think that it's a pick that they're making with an understanding that, like, yeah, there's a very good chance we're going to need him to get, to be on the field, maybe the later half of the season, wherever it may be. Like, he's going to have to hit the field. And so, I think Jets fans should try to take that into consideration. I think there's going to be opportunities to get better at wide receiver. I think, along those lines, it's going to be really critical for them to make sure that they're, not leaning on a player who, didn't really seem to be bought in all the way as a wide receiver too, while Mike Williams is getting to 100%. And I think, I'm talking about there with Lazard, the last half of last season, the vibes were not looking really good from him in terms of his commitment and just general feelings around the team. So you don't want a situation like that where he's kind of being relied on for, as the clear cut number two. You do, it'd be great to have kind of a younger wide receiver who's threatening for that spot, making their way up. But yeah, the Jets are going to have some opportunities. We'll talk a little bit about those later on. But yeah, I think the negative reactions from fans is honestly mostly just the result of the Jets having two concerning needs at premium positions, at wide receiver and offensive tackle. The Jets aggressively addressed both of those positions in free agency, right? So, like, with signing Mike Williams, with signing Tyron, signing Morgan Moses, like they adequately addressed those positions in free agency, um, and set themselves up well for the draft to make a strong decision in either direction. I think they made the decision to go with the offensive line again, like I talked about, because of that level of insurance that they didn't have last season that they feel like they desperately need now, and also a little bit of long-term stability as well. So you're not having to look back at the position again in a few years, right? You instead know that you have something that you're building long term, not just there, but all in other places along the offensive line as well. With ABT and with Titman, you're feeling pretty confident in what you're starting to build for the long term as well. So um, I think that the the draft is always a little bit different, right? You're It's not like a free for all, right? You're not all just trying to clamor up and get the same players, right? They have to follow the flow of what was happening with the other selections above them, right? And they reports are that they tried to trade up, and maybe that was for a wide receiver, but they didn't have the opportunity to, and nothing really came to fruition. So I think at that point, when they couldn't get up to, I think some of the rumors were, yeah, just somewhere in the top 10, right? Um, when you know that that's not going to happen, you're basically like, great. I think we know how the board's going to break. At that point, most front offices know pretty well where teams are leaning, right? But I think for the Jets, at that point, they kind of understood that offensive tackle was going to be the move, likely. And so when that happens, yeah, you're like, great. Who's the best offensive tackle remaining that we would like to target? And at that point, for them, it was Fashanu. And it's pretty cool to see that, like, they get someone who is a natural left tackle. I think that's really important for the long term. And obviously, you know, a lot of these high end tackles are skilled enough to switch sides, but I think somebody with that, it's important to just have that mindset, right? To where you are kind of used to playing on the left side, used to getting those reps in. And so, yeah, I think that it was a solid pick. I love the player. I think it's someone who's consistent, but also has such a promising upside. I want to I do want to emphasize for Jets fans, it's not like Fashanu was like this consolation prize, right? Where you're like, we can get pass catcher, and now we're settling for this offensive tackle. We wanted something better, and it's like, no, you're getting someone who has a pretty impressive ceiling. And I want to go through a little bit of Connor's scouting report for Fashanu, because I think there's some elements that are super important. I think his ability to move, his athleticism, he had that dancing bear trait, right? He's someone who's like an excellent athlete for his size, 6'6", 312. Like, he has that like kind of perfect NFL offensive tackle physique, right? Where he has the height, but he's 312, so he's cut. He has the long arms. He's got the 32-inch vert for his size. It's pretty good. So like, you can see he got some good movement ability. He's got some explosiveness. You can see all that on tape, right? He's high character player, which of course that Joe Douglas and the coaching staff love that. They love to get players in that have that type of ability to lead. So I think that he's somebody who can step in and probably fit in really well with a lot of the young leaders that the Jets have within that locker room, and hopefully kind of continue to push that to the next level. I think a lot of the Jets' internal, culture change, as much as we hate to talk about that, is going to come from those younger players. And it helps when your young leaders are the blue chip players within the roster. And I think that's something that the Jets desperately need. You need more guys like Brees. You need more guys like Sauce. You need more guys like Garrett Wilson, who are going to call things like it is and move the team in the right direction. And I think that one of the best examples they've had over that over the past few years is Quinnen Williams, someone who isn't like a rah-rah guy, but like great guy when it comes to leading by example, and became more vocal eventually as his career progressed. Again, just more players like that in the locker room that you have that not just talk. They also kind of show it on the field, and they're the best players that you have. When you kind of build with those type of players, that's where you kind of get the culture. Is like, yeah, our best players are also, have that mindset that kind of leads to winning. So I think it's really important. But yeah, I think he's just like a prototypical tackle. The player comp that Connor had, I'm sure you've heard this a few times now, but like it is one that excites me a lot. The Brickshaw Ferguson, like if you can get someone who can give you the level of consistency and high end play that DeBrickashaw Ferguson gave the Jets for all those years, right? That's an outstanding pick, right? That's one of the best draft picks the Jets ever made in the past, right? So if you're getting somebody like that in now with a little bit of insurance or a little bit of protection ahead of him, right? So he gets to hone in on his game, and you get to be basically guaranteed that when he steps on the field, he's going to be ready, right? Like there's a good chance he's ready now. He came back for his final year at Penn State. He could have left earlier, but like came back, built himself up a little bit more, right? And so you already know that he's more ready than most, right? But then you have the further protection for him now with Morgan Moses and Tyron Smith ahead of him, to where it's like, great, if he earns that spot early, then he really earned it, right? Then like this is a baller, and we just have to get him on the field, right? If he takes his time, that's fine too, right? You have two experienced guys who can keep the offense going no matter what, right? And so it's just a win-win for the Jets when it comes to Fashanu. And I think it's something that if you look, like injuries for the Jets have been terrible. They're not making like any like major medical staff changes or anything like that. Like you just want to make sure that you're accounting for the things that haven't changed, right? The field hasn't changed yet, right? Like all these factors haven't changed, right? And so it's like, great, if there's a chance there's going to be more injuries next year, you want to make sure that you're set up right. And then if there's a chance that you can get somebody who can be your left tackle for the next 12 years, then you do that as well, right? So again, nice little win-win for the Jets with Fashanu. And yeah, I think that tutelage of Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses is going to be super helpful. I think the other element to that mentorship is that, with all the talk there was about Keith Carter throughout the offseason, right? I think the veteran presence of Moses and Smith is, could really make up for anything that's lacking within the coaching staff, thankfully. So I think that's a good sign. I think that's something that should leave you more positive when it comes to the offensive line, is that he's going to have a lot, helping him along to develop his game. And on the other side of the ball, he's going to have some like legit ballers with Hassan Reddick and Jermaine Johnson really pushing him throughout camp and throughout practices to get better. So it's just a lot of positive stuff, man. I think the trenches are going to be really important for the Jets, and I think the trenches are going to look pretty good from what we're seeing so far with the additions that they've been making. So it's important to build the trenches, and the Jets are making sure that they do that. So major props to the front office for that. And then just talking about day two, I know we're going to beat us to death a little bit. We've talked about it a little bit earlier as well. But yeah, look, the Jets are probably going to try to trade up, and they're probably going to try to get a wide receiver. It seems like their ammo is probably not going to get them to the top of the round. So you're probably looking at like middle of round 2, to the maybe late round 2. But, I think with the way the wide receivers have been flying off the board, the pickings may not be as, great as maybe, fans would want, wherever they do end up. But I think that I think they have a pretty good chance to get, players like Roman Wilson, Troy Franklin, Malachi Corley, and then Jermaine Burton and Devontae Walker. Just talking about a few of them, I think Roman Wilson is the one that had a pre-draft visit officially. He's a pretty exciting player. I think I've really loved everything I saw from him at Michigan. I think he's someone who always made big plays. He's someone who is a little bit slight, not that slight. I think his measurements were honestly a little bit more than I think some may have thought. He's 6 foot 192. Like, it's a pretty solid build. but extraordinarily good athlete, 4.3 40, 4.39, good acceleration. He's just such a reliable receiver. To go along with that explosiveness, Greg wrote a great report on him that you should check out in the guide. His comp for him was Tyler Lockett. It's pretty awesome comp. Like, I think if you can get somebody like Tyler Lockett in the fold, in around the area the Jets will be probably trading up to, I think that's a pretty ideal situation. And so I think that'd be a pretty good target. I'm a big fan of his game. He's just somebody, again, who just seems to always show up in the moment. Troy Franklin, big play guy. Another pretty interesting target for the Jets there as well. I think looking up his report, yeah, I think Connor did his report in the guide. He's definitely way more slight than somebody like Roman Wilson. He's taller, though. So he's almost 6'2", 176 pounds, right? Got great speed. Someone who just was a big play machine at Oregon with Bo Nix. Definitely one of those situations where you kind of look at the wide receiver talent and what they did for the quarterback. And I think it's a situation with Troy Franklin where he really, really, really made Bo Nix look really good. I think Bo Nix had a really good season last year, but I think you turn on the tape, you see a lot of big plays from Troy Franklin that really made that offense go. So yeah, I think he's a pretty exciting player. He's somebody who, again, despite the slight frame, he does kind of have a pretty good ability to make things happen after the catch. He's not going to, break a ton of tackles, but he's not like, he's just a little bit stronger, or I don't know. He definitely needs to work on his play strength, but I think as a big play receiver, he's somebody who, you can just get the ball into his hands, and if you scheme up things correctly, he can get you a huge chunk of yards, right? Once he's able to get separation, make his way downfield. So, yeah, I think Troy Franklin's a good player. Definitely someone else to take a look at. And again, check out their scouting reports in the guide. Guys did a great job on those. Malachi Corley, another guy. I think he's a thicker build guy, kind of again, not the, I don't even want to say the player comp that people always tend to have whenever you have a wide receiver who's like over 200 pounds and, has great yak ability. I feel like they just always get that comparison, but I like the one that Connor gave him in the guide of shorter Cordero Patterson. He just had insane production at a smaller school. Somebody who could be pretty intriguing for a really good offensive mind. I think it would be interesting to see how the Jets would use him specifically. It's really unclear, like, what their identity is on offense from last season and what Nate Hackett would maybe change from last season. So, yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see how the Jets would use a player like that. But I think there's a good chance they should be able to trade into a position to select somebody like that later today. So, yeah, I think with Jermaine Burton and Devontae Walker, I think they both have some concerns that will definitely have them available, probably closer to the Jets pick at 72 if they do stay there. I think for Jermaine Burton, it's he's just a little bit of a head case, I think, from a lot of the reports that came out, especially about him like switching schools and all that stuff. So he's going to really need leadership within that locker room to keep him steady and level-headed and get him through every season. I think the coaching staff is a good coaching staff for a player like that. Somebody like Salah, who's kind of the same every day, but also great at motivating, getting great at keeping people thinking about the team goals as much as he can. Sometimes some players just are, unsalvageable. But yeah, I think for Jermaine Burton, that would be a pretty important thing for the Jets to have, is good structure for him. For Devontae Walker, I think it's a different concern. He's just a really raw player. I think there's a lot of unknowns. He didn't play a lot last season. I think he would just be a bit of a project, right? So it's kind of a situation where you might have to wait a while before you see the fruit of what he's able to do, and you might not ever see the fruit of what he's able to do. And I think for a lot of Jets fans, that might give you a little bit of Denzel Mims fear, but I think he's a better player than Mims. I just think that you're dealing with a lot of the same amount of like rawness there, where if you don't have the right coaching in place, or if he's just not willing, you're not going to get reach the potential ceiling there, and the ceiling's pretty high. I think he's an outstanding athlete, elite athlete, but there's just a lot of things in his game that you're just unsure about. So, yeah, I think with the wide receiver position, I think the long shots you're looking at in terms of guys that are probably going to go earlier on day two, Keon Coleman, Lad McConkey, and Jalen Polk, I think are guys that are probably going to go pretty early in round two. And I think there's a good chance the Jets will miss out on those players because they just don't have the type of ammo that they need to get into that upper part of round two, unless they start to involve some 2025 draft picks. So, yeah, I think if any of those players are available wherever the Jets end up and the Jets can get them, those are the three players I think would be an absolute home run, because I think those are three players who can really step into that wide receiver 2 role as the season progresses and as they develop. I think those are some really special players in that group. So, yeah, I think there's a couple of things to look out for on day two. And yeah, again, I think Fashanu is a great pick. I know it's boring for some fans. I know y'all were still, and partially my fault for hyping it up sometimes, even with the draft guide password. But everyone's pretty hyped about pass catcher. But I think it was a pretty responsible pick. Again, like we were saying, they ate their veggies. Yeah, I think it's a responsible pick, and I think it's a pick in full reaction to last season. And yeah, like that's the right reaction. Make sure you have enough assurance. Make sure that you're feeling good about the future as well. And make sure that you're keeping your quarterback healthy, right? Because, the thing that ended the season was, the quarterback getting hit. So, yeah, I think it's important that they addressed offensive line, and it's important that they keep Aaron Rodgers clean next season. So, yeah, that's it for today's episode. I will talk to y'all next week. Tune in for the rest of the draft later tonight. Make sure you're following everybody on the team, and keep shouting us out with questions in the Discord. We'll make sure we answer those. I'll try to be a little more active in there. It's been a minute, but yeah, I'll try to be a little more active in there, because it's always really cool to see y'all interacting over there. So yeah, enjoy the rest of the draft, and we'll talk to y'all next week and see where the Jets end up. See y'all.